So before we begin our class today, we would like to, have a small session. You can say practicals. We will teach all of you how to do worship of the lordships at home, right? So it's a science. It's a proper science. It is mentioned in Pancharatrika Vidhi. So there is just like to worship the lordships in temple or in in temples and all, and even at home. It's a shastra in itself, but we are now going to teach you based on that shastra. However, we are simplifying things so that it is practical to follow, to do that at home. So now let us go to the house of one of our close devotees. So much sound. Inverter is crying. So inverter is dead. So now I will take all of you to one of our congregation devotees. So her name is Yashoda Prema Devi. I am spotlighting for everyone. So we are going to her home. In her home there is an altar. It's made of wood. The curtains are closed. So now we will see from the beginning till the end. How to take care of what all things to be taken care while we worship the deities and all that stuff. So let us go to their home, and while she will be doing, I will be doing the background commentary, running commentary. Yeah. So here is Mataji, Hare Krishna Mataji. Yeah. So she is one of our very wonderful congregation devotee. Her name is Yashoda Devi. So her husband, he is here. So he is Yadav Satyanarayana Prabhu, and he is an engineer in R&B department. And they have one wonderful son, right? He is also, he did his BTech from IIT Chennai. He is very close to me. And so now we are there in their home, and they have a beautiful altar. You can see, show the altar, Yeah, the curtains are there. So at home, either you can keep small deities if you wish, murtis, deities with murtis, or you can have photo frames. So what I am going to speak now is applicable whether you have the photo frames or whether you have the murtis, deities actually. So now it's always advisable. Best is like if you can have a separate one room dedicated for the Lord. Actually, grihastha means one who worships the lordships at griha. That is the definition of grihastha. Grihastha does not mean that somebody is married and shifted to an apartment. That doesn't make one a grihastha actually. So here is it's their own flat, and they have a beautiful altar made up of wood. The laminations are there. Now either you can have a closet, proper closet, and it's always advisable that we have curtains. If you have a separate room, then you can close that room. Even if you don't have curtains, okay. But if you have a closet for lordships, then it's advisable that you have a curtains, because we should also sometimes give rest to the lordships. And the way we take rest, we also give rest to the lordships. So now they are opening the altar for us. So before we open, we should always be in a fresh clothes, right? We should not wear old clothes. And before that, we do achaman. You see, she is doing achaman. I will tell you the procedure of achaman. Ata, just hold on. So the achaman is in that vessel. You see that brass vessel, There we put fresh water, not the water that we use from from fridge water or bottled water, but fresh water. As fresh as possible, directly from the tap or something. And in that you add some 3-4 drops of Ganga Jal, at least 1 cup of Ganga Jal, Ganges water. See, Shastra speaks water in itself is pure, Anything you touch with water, it becomes purified actually. That is a subtle science. So Ganges, the moment you mix Ganges water, it becomes Ganges water, the entire thing becomes Ganges. Now we do Bhuta Shuddhi, we purify our gross and subtle bodies by, this is Ganges water. We purify our gross and subtle body by, doing Achaman. So how do you do achaman? First, with the right hand, yeah. So with the right hand you touch the left one, and then with the left one you touch the right one, and then you do 3 times actually. You sip water, Om Keshavaya Namaha first time, and after that Om Narayanaya Namaha. After that Om Madhavaya Namaha, and then again you clean the water actually, right? So this way your Bhuta Shuddhi is done. And then we open the altar, and when we open the altar, we take the ganti, this bell, and then with making the sound, then we open the altar. That is, why do we do that? Jai Shri Shri Radha Shyam. Why do we do that? Because, and then when we open the altar, we bow down to the Lord. That's a process. See, just like when you go to office of your boss, you don't get that just barge in. You just knock the door. Actually, that's a sign of respect and etiquette. So similarly, when we enter the altar, either you may have a separate room. Then when you open the room, you should make a sound. Either you should knock it or you should clap something. Similarly, when you open or if you have a closet, and if you closed it with a cloth, with a curtain, then before opening it, also either you can play this bell or you can clap the hand. You see, they have a fan. See inside the altar, because we should treat the lordships as personal as possible. So if it's always advisable, we have some fan or AC, right? We treat them as a persons actually. Now this is the altar they have, and now we will see how do we do worship actually. So the worship is very simple. We have simplified for all of you. So it is according to Shastra. So the basic ingredients for worshipping are Dhupa, Deepa and Pushpa. Dhupa means incense. Deepa means, you can see the ghee lamp. And the Pushpa means it's flowers. So these three things are sufficient to worship the Lord actually. Worship can be done ideally in the morning after taking our bath, before taking our breakfast food, something. And if there are people, after offering the food to the Lord, again we do Aarti, but that is not a compulsory and it is not feasible for everyone. But once in a day, at least we should do it. That's a very powerful way of establishing our relationship with the Lord. And that's a very powerful way of developing the consciousness that I am Lord's servant, So yeah. So now they are showing how to do kind of, because this incense is touched by many outsiders also, we do archman to the incense also. Best is like, after glowing, then we offer incense. Okay, it's already, yeah, she did not lit fire. We lit fire, and then after that we do archaman, because this incense may be prepared by somewhere outside, so we purify everything that we offer. So before once, with archaman, and then we do to the worships, we offer to the worships. So how do we do that? The main photo, the main frame which we worship, here it is Radha Krishna. So before that we offer, we take permission from the spiritual guru, okay? Because our understanding is that we are not qualified to directly worship the Lord. So we take permission of guru to worship the Lord, and then we start worshipping. You see here there is Radha Krishna. First we offer 7 times to Krishna. We rotate 7 times. 7 is a number mentioned in the scriptures. 7 times to the entire form of the Lord, right? After that 7 times to the form of Radharani, and after that 7 times to the forms of Krishna Balram or Gaurnita. This is other photo is there. So we all have main photos. Ideally, it's best if we have some photo of Krishna's photo or Vishnu's photo. We can worship, and then we also may have a smaller photos at home. So we can even worship them also. Like Narsimhadev is here and Jagannath is here. So we offer 3 times to Narsimhadev, we offer 3 times to Jagannath. So the main photo we offer 7 times. Other photos we can offer 3 times. And again after that we should always, it's always best if we have Tulsi with us, Tulsi Maharani. Tulsi may be outside, but we bring them to, while worshipping now, we bring Tulsi next to the altar. Tulsi also 2 times worship. Tulsi is very dear to the Lord. After worshipping Tulsi, again we worship the Guru. So some of you say, Prabhu, I don't have a Guru in my life. That's okay. See, because we are all now in touch with Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is by Srila Prabhupada. So having Srila Prabhupada's photo, we can take them and accept him as a Guru. If you have Bhagavad Gita at your home, then Bhagavad Gita backside Prabhupada's photo is there. You can put Prabhupada's photo also. Or in your mind also, you can remember Prabhupada in worship. And then we worship to the people, and then we offer the dhupa as a prasadam to everyone. If there is somebody else in your family members. After that we offer deepa. So dhupa represents earth element, deepa represents fire element, and pushpa represents air element. So we offer panchamahabhuta. Actually we also offer argyam, water and also cloth. But here we are not doing, we are doing it simple. So this is Deepa, and again we are doing Archaman to Deepa also. and then we offer same way the way we offered Dhupa, we offer Deepa also. The difference here is that instead of directly offering 7 times, similarly we show it to the Guru Parampara, right? We said the Guru Parampara, you know? Then instead of offering directly 7 times, we offer 4 times to the lotus feet of the Lord. We offer to the lotus feet first, then we offer to the 2 times we offer to this one, and that 3 times to the face of the Lord actually. So 4, 2, 3 and total 7 times. Similarly, we will do the same thing to the Radharani actually. So 4 times to the lotus feet, 2 times to the middle portion, and 3 times to the lotus face, and 7 times to the entire body, the entire form of Lordships. So same way with the other deities also. So Dhupa is only 7 times total, and here it is 4, 2, 3, 7. Right? So similarly here also 4, 2, 3, 7 we offer. Then to the small photos we offer 3 times. Narsimha there 3 times, Jagannath deities. You may have whatever, we can offer, no problem. And then we offer to Tulsi Maharani 3 times, then again to Guru Parampara 7 times. And then we also show it to offer it to all the devotees who are present, like their family members and all. They accept the Deepa as a prasadam of the Lord actually. In temples also, if you see, the Pujari offers to everyone, and to the Lordships and then to all of us, and each of us we take the Deepa, as an Naivedyam. It's very simple process. Then it is Pushpa, right? See, this entire process, it actually represents the 5 gross elements and the 8 subtle elements. The Pushpa also we do like Dhupa, only 7 times. Each personality 7 times we offer. So this Dhupa, it's a earth element. Earth represents fragrance. So Dhupa is fragrance. And then Deepa is fire element. Actually we also offer Vastra also. That is also earth element. And this flowers is the air element. And then conch shell. We do conch shell, right? That is ether, sound. Sound means ether. That is the ether. Then with mind also we offer, mind and intelligence we do mantra. Mind also we count numbers. And we also bow down in front of the Lord. That is like ego. So earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. All the 8 elements actually we offer. But that is a science. But simply speaking, Dhupa 7 times, Deepa also 7 times, or 4, 2, 3, 7 you can do. The lotus feet 4 times, middle part 2 times, and face 3 times, and total body 7 times. And this Pushpa also 7 times, for the main deities. And for the smaller ones, you can do 3 times each, like this, And before doing everything, we should do Achaman, because Achaman that purifies, right? Everything pure has to be offered to the Lord. Ganges water, because Ganges water is touched by the Lord's lotus feet. It is Charana Amrita. It purifies everyone and everything. Right? So that completes this thing. So if those who have conch shell, they can blow conch shell. And otherwise also no problem. We just bow down to the Lord and we thank the Lord for giving us the opportunity to worship them. And then we keep the altar like this sometimes, and because now it is night, she may close it. So tomorrow she will teach us how to offer Bhoga to the Lord, what is the process to be followed, and we'll also tell you what are the mantras to be chanted. Okay, it seems that you see my laptop is getting discharged, so it may get off at any time, and in case if it gets discharged, I will start another laptop and I will start the program. I will log in that way. Maybe there may be some 2 minutes delay. Kindly join in the new laptop. Okay, at least now we want to complete today's session, and hopefully we'll see. There are floods in our place. Our temple is flooded. There is no power in our area. Thank you very much, Mataji. We are very thankful to you. So all of you can thank Mataji, right? You can say thank you in your chat box to Mataji. Hare Krishna. Okay. Yeah, wonderful. Actually, anything we learn from anyone, we should say thank you. No? So these are very good habits, gratitude. So we'll start our today's session by chanting prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So let me start. So I am trying to preserve the power so that we can go as long as possible. It's showing 15 minutes more. So we will, it's already 8:20, so we will not summarize yesterday's class. We'll directly start with today's class. Okay. So I will be going little faster today. And if the session is also a little easy, we will see why is it easy. So today's chapter is called Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana Yoga means Ashtanga Yoga, meditation. Right. So you can. Yesterday we have seen this chapter 5. Today's, as I said, today's chapter is easy. The acronym also happened to be easy. What a coincidence, huh? So EASY. So Krishna essentially talks about 4 concepts here. So he refers to what? Enemy or friend. He is referring to the mind. Krishna first speaks about the mind and is telling whether mind is enemy or friend. After that, Krishna talks about Ashtanga Yoga. After that, Krishna talks about success and failure. And after that, Krishna talks success and failure in yogic process. The last section is, he talks about how yogi is superior to everyone and without and the categorization amongst the yogis. So, so these are the concepts Krishna covers. So, but let us see why this concept came up. I want to kind of summarize the entire chapter in the beginning and then go into the details, right? You see, last chapter, Arjuna, Krishna spoke to Arjuna. He said, work in renunciation is superior to renouncing the work. I hope all of you remember this point. We discussed this in 3rd chapter, we discussed it in 5th chapter also. Right? Work, in the mood of renunciation or detachment is superior to renouncing the work. Right? So because why it is so? Because the heart is impure. Because the heart is impure, even if you run away from your services, even if you run away from your responsibilities, and stop doing the work, but your mind is always hyperactive, and the mind will pull you down. That is what we have discussed. So Krishna says that till that your mind is fully pure, till that your heart is completely pure, then we should not renounce the work, but actually we should do the work in the mode of renunciation, I mean detachment, Nishkama Karma Yoga. But then there are people who completely becomes purified from their purified in their hearts. Like, so for them, Krishna is telling then, so the perfection of Nishkama Karma is Ashtanga Yoga, Krishna says. Then those people can actually renounce the work. They can renounce their work, they can go to forest, they practice celibacy, and they can do dhyana till the time they give up their body. That means they are in meditation till the flag end of their life. So that is the process of dhyana yoga. So, like for example, if you see in the earlier ages, so the person, a typical normal person, he would go to Gurukula, learn from this guru, come back, get married, practice a dharmic grihastha household life, and he practice nishkama karma till the age 60, 70. When he grows old, he takes vanaprastha, retires from his life, and he would go to forest. He would keep his wife, and then he would go to forest, and he would practice meditation. Actually, that is called dhyana. So this dhyana yoga was very famous, but this dhyana yoga is done. This is called Ashtanga yoga and Ashtanga yoga, but this is primarily called yoga. So this, in general, yoga means Ashtanga yoga. Although yoga can refer to karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, and they would go to forest and they would practice celibacy, extreme austerity, meditation, everything. So that is the Ashtanga yoga. Krishna speaks about it. Then Arjuna asks some questions about Ashtanga yoga and about mind. So and then actually, so for this process to happen, as we said, what are the conditions? The conditions are like, the heart should be purified and the mind is purified of desires and the mind is also purified. So Krishna begins this chapter by speaking about mind, because you see, any yogic process, be it karma yoga, be it jnana yoga, be it dhyana yoga, or be it bhakti yoga, for any yoga process, that means any transcendental spiritual practitioner, for him the thing that he has to take care of, the first place is his mind, right? So the mind is a very important aspect for all spiritual processes. Krishna speaks, let us see what Krishna speaks about mind. So many people sometimes, these spiritual practitioners, they say mind is very dangerous. A yogi should never trust the mind, it's very bad and like that. But let us see what Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita about the mind. Krishna says, Bandhuratmanas tasya yenat maivatmana jita anatmanastu satrutve varte tatmaeva shatruvat. He says, for one who has conquered the mind is his best friend. But for one who has failed to do so, it is the worst enemy. That means mind can be the best of all of your friends. I mean, what favor it can give you, it's unbelievable. But what mind can do to you is also unbelievable, So it can be worst enemy also for one who is not controlled. So which means Krishna is telling, he is not telling mind is good or bad. He is telling that it all depends upon you. So the example that can be given is that of a knife. So a knife, whether it is good or bad, a knife in the hands of a surgeon, it can save life. But the same knife in the hands of a murderer, it can take away the life. So it can save life, it can take away the life, right? So is the knife good or bad? It depends upon the person who is using it. Similarly, is the mind friend or enemy? It depends on the person who is controlling it. If you can control it, it's your friend. If you cannot control it, it's your enemy. Mind, there is another analogy given in the scripture about the mind. They say that mind is also like a child. You see, this child, is it so easy to control a child? Child goes in the market, and the child sees something, which may not be good for him, and he asks for it. And mother refuses to purchase. And child sits down and he cries, weeps, yells, and sobbing, and this, that. And mother ignores it. He cries further, and mother, tries to explain. He cries further. Mother beats him. He cries further. So it's not so easy to control the child. Not everybody can control children actually. And this mind is also compared to a monkey, because monkey is known for its unstable mind, fickle mind. It keeps jumping from one branch to another. It just cannot stay in one place. That's the reason the children, those who are too mischievous, what do we call them? We call them bandar hai. So he is like a monkey. So the mind is also compared to a monkey. Now let us see what the mind can do to you, how it can be your worst enemy. Let us see. So the mind follows the sinful desire like lust, anger, greed. As I said in 3rd chapter, we have seen at the end of 3rd chapter, Krishna categorizes the things. He says that the mind is superior than the senses. Mind is superior than senses, and buddhi is superior than the mind, and the atma is superior than the buddhi. Right? So atma, buddhi, man, or indriya, senses. So now Krishna speaks in these 3-4 shlokas actually what is mind control. You see, everybody talks about mind control. I remember that first day that I took this session, one gentleman, he asked this question, "Sir, please tell us how to control the mind." So this is a question more or less in every program somebody or other will ask. And there are so many books in the market which speaks about, mind control. And but would it not be wise to hear about mind control from the one who has indeed created the mind? So Krishna is the one who created the mind. So let us hear from Krishna what he speaks about the mind. So how is it worst enemy, and how it is the best friend, and how it can be controlled. So if it's, as I said, what are the objects of senses? Senses are nothing but the knowledge acquiring. So they acquire knowledge. They're only the receptor. They're like the machines. They don't have feelings. The senses, they see something very good looking. They give the information to the mind. Something very good smelling. They give the information to the mind. Something very good to the ears. They give the information to the mind. Whatever they're seeing, of course, not good and bad. Everything they give them input to the mind. So mind, mind receives all the information from all the five senses, and mind has a storage. It has experiences. Like for example, in the mind says gulab jamun. Mind has an already experience of what a gulab jamun tastes like. When the eyes give the information, here is gulab jamun, the mind immediately goes to the database repository to find out what the taste of gulab jamun is like. And then mind remembers, oh, that was a very pleasant experience, So immediately mind feels it's very pleasant, I want it. So the immediately what happens, the tongue starts watering, And even if it is a mirchi, red chilies, the mind remembers, when the eyes will give the information, and the mind remembers, oh, it burns your entire body, then you don't feel like going for it. Your hand and legs do not move towards it. So what I'm trying to say is that mind, it senses give information to the mind, and mind says, I want it, I don't want it, That means, accept and reject. So the mind's function is accept and reject, and then intelligence is the one who sanctions or doesn't sanction. So intelligence controls the mind. Intelligence says, you know what, you may like it, but it is not good for you. It's extremely dangerous for you. So don't go for it. And when the intelligence is not powerful, then it cannot control the mind. And when the mind is uncontrolled, it becomes worst enemy. So then mind doesn't care for that intelligence. And what happens? The mind just, whether it is good or bad, it just does it. And what happens as a result of that? It puts itself in danger. So attached to sense gratification. Right? For example, we all must have done so many sinful activities in the past. We may have had some bad habits. But after coming to spiritual life, sometimes people see they avoid that. But sometimes maybe they just happen to come across it, and the senses give the information to the mind. And the mind says, oh, last time I had it, I smoked, I drank it, Or maybe sometimes some people are going to the indulge in illicit relationships, a brothel house, something like that. So you remember the experience and you may have liked it. The intelligence says, you know what, it's very bad for you. Should we start that? I think my battery is almost dying. So we'll start very soon. The intelligence will tell you, you know what, that's not at all good for you, But the mind says, I don't care. And what happens? Mind will take you inside and will do all wrong things. When you come out, the same mind will tell you, the same mind which told you, do it, it's very good. The same mind will tell you, you are a waste fellow. You don't have any sense control. You don't have any resolutions, you are a good for nothing guy. The same mind will demoralize us. So that mind, if it's uncontrolled, it is attached to sense gratification, and it will get irritated for every small thing. Mind expects all attention. You see a small child, it expects all the attention of this world, and if the mother here and there, it gets disturbed actually. You see the best example is the best example is Hiranyakashipu. So Hiranyakashipu, who has conquered the three worlds, and everybody is accepting his sovereignty. There is only one small child, Prahlad, his son, he is not accepting Hiranyakashipu's authority and supremacy. And how does it should really matter? But then one person is not accepting, and because of that, Hiranyakashipu is extremely frustrated and miserable. So I am stopping it. I am continuing in my another laptop. So, okay. Oh, that's wonderful. So you have changed the host. I can keep speaking. Thank you. So here, this Hiranyakashipu, everyone is following him. One person, in the entire creation is not accepting him. But the mind's nature is that mind focuses on that thing, on the negativity. The one thing it's focusing, leaving aside everything, and because of that, Hiranyakashipu is most frustrated and most irritated person actually. Why this person is not accepting me? Why this person is not accepting me? Arey Baba, the entire rest of creation is accepting you. Be happy with that. No. Why he is not accepting actually? And because of that, although he has conquered the entire world, because he did not conquer his mind, because he doesn't conquer his mind, this mind made him mess of his life, and he's the most frustrated person actually. So you see the power of mind. The mind can make a hell, even if you are in heaven. To the degree you may, it can force a person to the degree of taking him to commit suicide also. That is what mind can do. Because mind focuses on the negativity actually. And as a result of that, you think everyone is your enemy, and then it will create enmity. Mind is also, as I said, is like a monkey. Monkey means it just does not allow you to be in the present. You are doing one thing, and mind will ask you to do exactly the opposite thing. Like say for example, you are studying and there is IPL match happening and your neighbor is watching, or maybe your mind will say, when you're studying, you think, oh, let me see the score, what's happening and other things. Oh, 2 minutes for 2 minutes, and then you hear your mind and you open the computer, and then in 4 hours gone, and then you remember tomorrow is my exam, and you're concerned, oh, exam. The mind will say, arey, you're always like this only, you are just not focused, and you are good for nothing guy, you don't deserve to pass, and you are a waste fellow, and the same mind will criticize us again, it will make you, feel guilty. The same mind has dragged you, the same mind again will make you feel guilty actually. So the mind always changes, toggles actually, and it will not allow you to focus, do one thing, and it will make you to, if you are doing one thing, like for example, maybe I'll speak that later. So these are some of the symptoms of the, okay, you have disabled screen sharing for me. Okay, maybe fine. So this is the about uncontrolled mind. But when the mind is, so that way it is the greatest enemy, because what happens, it's complete, as I said, the senses take it in different directions, and mind just follow the senses, doesn't hear the intelligence. And we have seen in the picture, right, the chariot, when the driver is weak, he cannot control the reins, then what happens, the horses will go in all different directions, and the chariot collapses, and the passenger also collapses. They can't reach the destination. So uncontrolled mind, a yogi who cannot control his mind, whichever path of yoga he is taking, he will be doomed in his spiritual life. So but when a mind is controlled, then what? The mind is the greatest friend, right? Like same example, if you think about it, you are studying, and you are hearing the sounds of cricket match commentaries and all, and the senses, ears are giving the information. So the mind then remembers how maybe Sachin is playing century, Dhoni is hitting 6, so and so forth. Then immediate intelligence will tell, arey, come on, you can do it later, tomorrow is the exam, let me focus on studies, and later on I can watch it on YouTube or something like that, Then immediately mind will accept, yeah, it's perfect, let me study now, and mind will cooperate, and mind will focus on studies, because mind has agreed to be intelligence friend, so it has become as our friend actually, right? Similarly, same example, like you may have had some bad experiences or habits, and again those same things come in front of you, then the senses will give the knowledge to the mind, and the mind will remember the past experiences, and then I want it, I don't want it, but the intelligence will tell you, what, you do it again, you will ruin your life, again you will go back to your past life, do you really want that? Mind will say, no, I will not go for it. So which means the senses will still keep giving inputs. Senses, Jnanendriyas means 24/7, all throughout the year, all throughout the lifetime, they will keep giving inputs. But the mind refuses to entertain it actually. Because of which, that is a sense controlled person. It is said, a sense controlled person can stand amongst 100 naked women, still he will not get agitated actually. It is mentioned in the scripture also. Why? Because he is completely shunned his internal senses, which means his mind, and because of which even the external senses are there, it doesn't really affect him. For example, for a devotee of the Lord, he may be, so as I said, when the mind is controlled, it just follows the direction given by the soul and the intelligence, and it will make right choices, right? Because like as I mentioned, that it will not get disturbed by the senses, and it will act according to the direction of the intelligence. And as I said, it will detach from sense gratification, it will focus on the positive things, and mind will not be attention seeking the way uncontrolled mind is. The mind is focused on the absolute thing. And as a result, what happens? Freedom and elevation. Freedom from what? Freedom from sense gratification. You see, freedom from bad habits, and that is actually real freedom. Sometimes people say, if you want, I can smoke. If you want, you cannot smoke. Actually, if we want, we can smoke. But if you want, also you cannot give up. You have freedom only till that time you do not do it. Once you start doing it, it becomes an addiction actually. So, though one's mind is controlled, then actually controlled mind, he is actually a free bird. You see, there are so many people now who make so many plans. Oh, this year I am going to get good CGPA, this year I am going to crack the exam, this year I am going to work on my health, this year I am going to work on my this particular thing. So we make so many plans in the beginning of the year, but how many of them really end up in making it? I mean, not even 5% of the times. And why so? Because your mind is not in our control. But once whose mind is in control, then that same mind will help us. You know what, we are supposed to do this, we are not doing that. This is what the advantage. The mind, if it is controlled, it can become the greatest friend, right? I mean, what a mind, when a mind becomes cooperative, it can focus and it can be so productive. What not it can do, it can become extremely sharp, right? Because it will allow you to grasp also easily, it will allow you to take right decisions. So all this will happen when the mind is controlled. How do we control the mind? That we will see in subsequent shlokas. Essentially what Krishna speaks is that the mind can be controlled by abhyasa. Abhyasa means a practice. And the mind can be controlled by vairagya. That means regulation. By regulation and by practice, you can control the mind. So those people who are very stable in control, it's just not that it just happened like that. No. They practiced it. And also because of their habits, that they are able to have a very firm and stable mind. So how do we? What is that abhyasa that we are talking about? The abhyasa is the A, B, C, D mind control. What is A? A refers to association. Association means the kind of inputs. I think somebody shared a comment in the chat box that we should watch our thoughts. Certainly, I already spoke this in my other class actually. I said watch your thoughts, because thoughts becomes words, and words become actions become habits become characters become culture. So it all depends on the thoughts. That means what kind of thoughts are entering the system, and thoughts are nothing but the resultant of the association. If you are associating with the right people, right, especially in a spiritual life, you should associate with like-minded people. So why the temples are there? Because temples provide that association, right? Like for example, what we are doing now, it's a virtual association, but it is association. We are learning so many good things. This will surely help, and it will make us more peaceful, more happy, and more enlightened. This is the right association actually. But same time, there is always a wrong association available. If you take wrong association, mind will. You may not be having the desire before, but then people think, oh, let us go for a party, and there's a drug culture. And then even if you never did it, then that enter your mind. And even if you don't do it today, that thought keeps on harvesting, and someday you may succumb to that. Association is the most important factor. And next comes B. B for books, right? The other day also on third chapter we discussed it. What did we discuss? We discussed that the mind, intelligence and senses. How the intelligence is strengthened? Intelligence is strengthened by reading spiritual literature, books, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam kind of things. That will strengthen our intelligence. You will get a clarity of what is life, what is not, what is that we should worry for. So the Bhagavad Gita will give you such a clear and calm intelligence by which you can easily control the mind actually. So B for books, C for chanting. I have already spoken 100 times. The chanting is the holy names of the Lord. It thoroughly purifies our heart. our mind, our consciousness, subtle body, everything actually. In the third chapter also we discussed, we said that intelligence will be strengthened by Bhagavad Gita, mind will be purified by chanting, and senses will be purified by regulation. Right? Chanting, D for diet. Diet means the kind of food that we take. Right? There is a gradation in the kind of food also. Actually, there is a gradation for each input that our senses takes, including the food. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance. The kind of food and the kind of consciousness with which we are taking, that directly affects our mind also. You take the very spicy sattvic food, then you are going to have a very passionate mind. Goodness food, the mind will be in goodness. It's like that. The best way is that we offer it as a bhoga to the Lord and we accept it. Then that food will be completely pure, sanctified, free from the modes, and it will purify our heart, it will purify our mind. So A, B, C, D, this is a process, and that requires abhyasa, practice. We will see that later. So now let me share slides. Right? So friend, enemy. So now Krishna goes into Ashtanga Yoga. Now that he spoke about the importance of mind control, he said for whichever yoga you are, be it Karma Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, or even Bhakti Yoga, this mind control is absolute essential. So now, because this chapter, as I mentioned, is about Ashtanga Yoga. As I said, Ashtanga Yoga is it for everyone or not? It's not for everyone, right? It's not for householders, right? It's not for completely celibates. It has to be done in the forest, and heart has to be completely pure, senses have to be completely regulated. And for them, this dhyana means meditation, dhyana yoga is given. But then these days, in the name of yoga, in the name of Ashtanga Yoga, so many things are in the market. See, what is yoga? People think yoga means what? Breathing exercise, pranayam. People think yoga means asanas, right? So that yoga? Actually, is that the definition of yoga? Other day, I think yesterday only one lady chatted in this group or other class, I don't know, that Swamiji, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about yoga. Why you are not speaking about yoga? I am to teach us about this asanas and pranayama. Well, of course, Krishna do speak about yoga, and Krishna also spoke about the Ashtanga Yoga in this chapter itself, which actually covers this asanas and pranayams. But what for Krishna spoke that, and what exactly, where do they stand in the bigger picture, we will see. See, as I said, in the name of yoga, there are so many books in the market. Office yoga, you can see here. Desktop yoga, yoga for business, yoga tennis, right? That means so people are using yoga for so many purposes, for health, for recreation, for even sex, for office performance, for wellness, for different of our blood pressures, for different purposes. People are saying yoga as the cure. But actually, what is a yoga? Krishna spoke in Bhagavad Gita. Yoga means yukta iti uchyate yogi. One who is connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is said to be yogi. And this is yogi. And what is yoga? Yoga means the process of connecting to the Supreme Lord is called yoga. I repeat, the process of, if kindly note it down, and the process of connecting oneself to the Supreme is called yoga. The process or the sadhana, whatever you can call it as the practice, that is called yoga. Yoga means connection to the absolute. And there are multiple yogic paths. As I said, karma yoga means through karma you are connecting to the Supreme. Jnana yoga means through knowledge you are connected to the Supreme. Dhyana yoga, that is this Ashtanga yoga, means through meditation you are connected to the Supreme. Through meditation, not through pranayama asana. And Bhakti yoga means through bhakti, through love and to serve. By serving and loving, you are connected to the Supreme actually. So these are the different paths, right, by which we can connect. But then yoga means connection. Yoga means connection to the Supreme, right? So this Ashtanga yoga, if you see, this process is also the jiva is connecting to the Supreme. In Ashtanga yoga, what is the Supreme? Paramatma. In Bhakti yoga, the Supreme is called Bhagavan, right? And in Jnana yoga, the Supreme is called impersonal Brahman, right? The same Lord, they are perceived in a different ways. In Ashtanga yoga, it is Paramatma. there are 8 steps of the Ashtanga, right? That means 8. There are 8 angas, 8 steps. What are the 8 steps? First one is Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So these are the 8 steps. Most of you may have heard about this. Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it is there. So, and you see here. So these are the first 4 steps. So these first 4 steps, they are actually the preparation for the meditation. So the actual meditation will start from step number actual meditation will start from the step number 5. Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So Yama and Niyama means do's and don'ts. If you see any path, be it spiritual or be it material, there will always be do's and don'ts. Is it not? You want to get first. For a student, what are the do's? Do's are go to school every day, take down notes, come back and study on the same day, get up early, associate with the right people, ask the teacher questions. These are some of the do's. What are some of the don'ts? Do not bunk classes, do not go late nights, do not overindulge in sports and movies, do not associate with wrong friends, do not waste your time in unnecessary things. Some of the don'ts. So for any successful path to begin, these are the requirements. Similarly for the Ashtanga Yoga, which means actually by meditation, right, by dhyana, that is dhyana, the first 4 things are the preliminary prerequisites. So first thing is like do's and don'ts by which you are preparing. After that, the Dhyana Yoga is done. For that, your body and mind has to be fully controlled. As I said, this is done by the people whose mind is pure and heart is free from sense gratification desires, right? So by asana, you are actually controlling the body. Because you have to meditate, you have to be, like we see in Krishna here, he will be mentioning about so many processes. If you read that chapter, you will understand. I mean to say, Kaisa Baitna, how we have to sit, how we have to meditate, how we have to close your eyes. How you have to put your consciousness in between, on the tip of your nose, in between the eyebrows, and which direction you have to sit, and what height you have to sit, and how you should breathe, how many times you have to breathe per minute. There are so many rules and regulations are there. That means, and for that, your body has to be in your control. The asanas will help you to keep the body in your control, and the pranayam will help you to keep your mind in your control. Pranayam means, it's like breathing exercises. So through breathing, breathe and mind, they are controlled, they are connected. We all know that. When the mind is agitated, you will breathe in one way. When the mind is peaceful, you will breathe in another way. Right? When mind is agitated, you will breathe faster. When mind is peaceful, you will breathe slower. Right? So mind and breath are controlled, connected actually. So pranayam helps you to control the mind. Asana helps you to control the body. Right? And by doing those things, then you are entering the meditation process. You see what I am speaking. If you wish, you can go and check with any yogi, and if that so what a so-called I mean to say yogic teachers outside, and if they are honest, they will accept what I am saying actually. So currently now, in the name of yoga, what we are teaching people is only asana and pranayam, which is not wrong, but that is actually not the thing what Bhagavad Gita spoke or what the Yoga Sutras speak actually. It's only you are taking a part of it and calling it as the yoga. Let us call it as exercise only, because yoga is not the term right term for it. Asanas and pranayams in itself doesn't asanas and pranayams in themselves cannot be called as yoga. Yoga means it is connection to the Lord. All 8 things will be called a yoga actually, because by doing all this step by step, you are connecting yourself to the Supreme Lord. Let us see how the step by step process happens. The first thing that is mentioned here is what? He should live in a secluded place. As I said, and should always carefully control his mind. Niyama means the kind of eating habits, sleeping habits, no sex allowed, and you have to be single. There are so many things are there. So this is not something that is performed at home. This is not yoga. This yoga is not something that you perform in the studios, yoga studios. You have to go to a forest, you have to stay alone, you have to, I mean to say, completely regulate all your sense enjoyment and your mind breathing. So many things are there. How you have to sit, which direction you have to sit on a pusa grass and on the deer skin, right? Seat should not be too high, too low, should be situated in a sacred place. One should hold one's body, neck and head in a straight line, stare steadily at the tip of the nose with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life. One should meditate upon me. Right, so that is called thing. And then pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Pratyahara means cessation of the senses. Dharana means cessation of the mind. That means senses and mind you are taking inside. There is a process to take them inside so that they don't agitate in your mind also. And dhyana means meditating on the limbs of the Lord. Like he meditated on Paramatma and different parts of the bodily parts of the limbs of Paramatma he meditates. And finally Samadhi means it's called Brahma Samsparshaja, which means when the in Samadhi stage where the soul is able to connect with the super soul, he becomes one with the super soul, and at that point when the touch union happens, the soul experiences unlimited bliss that can be unexplained actually. So that's the entire process. So ultimately this process, the jiva will reunite with the super soul, Paramatma. For yogis it is Paramatma. So this is the entire process actually. So if you think about it, can anybody do the yoga? Very difficult. First thing you need to have unagitated mind, no material senses, complete celibacy, right? Complete regulated habits, staying away from home, and they do it till the time they die, and then they give up their bodies like that. That is Dhyana Yoga. So this is a process. Arjuna is telling, you see, he is telling, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayuriva sudushkaram. He is telling that, my dear Krishna, the mind is restless, turbulent. He is telling mind is restless, is it not? You cannot focus. Like you come to temple, you stand in front of the deity altar, and you are looking at the Lord standing in front of you. In front of your eyes, Lord is there. Still, you cannot focus for 2 minutes. You are inside the temple hall, standing in front of the Lord. Still, your mind is wandering in 10 different places actually. And that too, can you, meditate on the form of the Lord inside the mind continuously? Is it a joke? Turbulent and obstinate. It means extremely strong and very dangerous pramati. So he's telling that it is more difficult than controlling the wind. And it is a fact actually. Even wind you may control, but mind is even more subtler. See, the wind, for it to move from one place to another, it takes some time. But for mind, in 1 second, it can travel all over the world. It can circumambulate all over the world and come back. So mind is so turbulent and restless. So Arjuna, who is speaking this? Arjuna is speaking. Arjuna is speaking when 5,000 years in Dwapara Yuga, where people are highly sense controlled. Arjuna itself, if you see Mahabharata, is extreme sense control there, extremely truthful, extremely chivalrous, extremely valor, and such kind of person who is telling that for me it is very difficult. It's practically not possible for me. So if that is the case with the Dwapara Yuga people, what about Kali Yuga people, Dhyana Yoga? It's not practical actually. So Krishna is speaking the same thing. Krishna is telling that my dear Krishna, it's very difficult. Krishna is agreeing. However, by practice one can control the mind. Krishna is telling actually. But then we will see later. Krishna says that how this path is practically not possible for current age. And then Krishna is telling about yoga in general. Krishna tells that this yoga process is always victorious. And how he speaks this concept? Because Arjuna asked this question. Arjuna asked this question. This is the third part of the section. He is telling, my dear Krishna, what happens to that yogis who could not become successful? And what does it mean by that? Like for example, we have accepted some path, be it karma, jnana, dhyana, bhakti. So we accepted the path of transcendence and we are practicing it. But maybe because our mind is too stubborn, after practicing the 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, mind again pull you back to your old life, to your old habits, and you may give it up. Then what? Is it that his material life also is being wasted sometime and his spiritual life is also wasted? What happens to such a person? Or it can also refer to something like this, that he has been practicing but he has not yet achieved perfection, but before that only his life ended, his life came to an end, he died maybe, let us say. So what happened to such a person, right? Because in material life also it happens, right? So let us see what Krishna is speaking. Krishna is speaking, Prapya punya kritam lokam usitva shashvatam sama suchinam srimatam gehe yogo brashto vijayate. He is telling the unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born in a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Which means such a person, he would experience heavenly pleasures, right? And then again he would take birth, amongst human species, and in a family of extremely pious, righteous, pious people, or in a family of rich aristocratic families. And then Krishna speaks in the next shloka that after taking birth there, very soon they will again come in contact with the transcendental path, and again they would pick it up very fast, and they would progress in their spiritual life from the path from the point where they have left in their previous lives. Right? I repeat, they would take birth in these good families, and they would come in contact with the transcendental path, and they would accept it very enthusiastically and pick it up from where they left in the previous lives. Right? That means Krishna is telling a very important lesson. What he's telling is that, you see, in material life, let us say you want to become a doctor. Let us say you want to become a doctor, right? Now you complete 5 years, it is a 6-year course, you complete 5 years. Now after that you stop, your records for whatever reason. You are not going to get a degree, and right? Or let us say accidentally you lost your life. Next life you start, even if you have a human birth, you are again have to start from ABCD, and in the next life, it's not even guaranteed that you will crack your MCET entrance, the medical entrance. Forget about getting the doctor degree. Although in your last life you have almost reached till the 5th year. Like this, even if somebody is as powerful and as intelligent as Einstein, next life again he has to start with ABCD itself. So the material life, because everything is related to it's a matter, and when the body is finished, everything in connection with the body is finished. However, this path, this yogic path, it doesn't belong to the body, it belongs to the Atma soul. That is the reason I said, right, there is something called Swadharma, there is something called Nitya Dharma. Swadharma means activities related to their body, Nitya Dharma means activities related to you, that is the soul. Because when the body finishes, all your things do not come forward, I mean your external talents and other things, and the money, wealth, everything will finish off. But then the activities that are performed at the Nitya Dharma level, they always accompany you. So Krishna is telling here that you may have done, let us say this is where you began, and you may have done something this much only in this lifetime. Next lifetime what happens, because you already started something, next life you take birth in a family which is congenial for your spiritual life, and when you pick up from somewhere, then you would very quickly come from, because you are coming from zero, very quickly come to that point where you left last time, and from there again you move ahead. And that's the reason sometimes we can see, sometimes there are people who came into the spiritual life much later than us. Maybe perhaps we have introduced them into spiritual life, and in very no time they pick up so fast, and we get shocked actually. Sometimes we see very young people, but still the amount of wisdom they have, the amount of advancement they make, and they are we can clearly see they are extremely advanced and knowledgeable and wise. How is it possible? Because it's most probably they may have already underwent a lot of advancement in the previous lives, because of which they are able to go on much faster. And Krishna also speaks that this is for those who have started the path of transcendence, yoga, and reached some point. But there are some people who have achieved a lot of advancement in this life, but then they could not complete it. They could not make themselves 100% pure. What about them? Krishna speaks, in the next life they take birth in the family of pure devotees, in the family of Vaishnavas, and because of which from day one they doesn't undergo any sinful life, and from day one they are connected to transcendence, and in the next life they very quickly accept it, and then they perfect their lives in the next time. So the spiritual life is not a life of one lifetime, so we should understand. You see, people work so hard to look beautiful, people work so hard to earn money, the girls, they literally die, to look more beautiful. The boys die to look to become more smart. They work so hard, so many cosmetics, gym, this, that. There's so much of time and energy, and so much anxiety if they do not look good. What for? 1 second is sufficient to wipe off all that they have been trying for. Is it not? One small, accident, time, this, that, and disease, anything can completely actually take away that. So it's a very temporary things. But however, but for that we invest so much of our time and energy, which can be wiped off at any moment. But on the other hand, this Nitya Dharma, the spiritual advancement that you are making, imagine even if you did little service, you offered one flower to God, you offered that service will not be vanished even after 100 lifetimes actually. That added to your spiritual credit. That's the power of the spiritual life. That is what Krishna is speaking here, right? So I think this should be a sufficient motivation for us to invest our time and consciousness in spiritual life. Krishna is telling how to control the mind, abhyasa, that means practice. See, now that is the reason I am telling that we all have to invest in ourselves also. That is the reason I am telling that kindly take up the chanting and try to chant every day without fail. And apart from the class, see, in class anyhow we are chanting, but in the morning hours also we can chant 1 or 2 rounds. It takes 15-20 minutes. You see, if we are ready to spend 23 hours for the body, why not spend 1 hour for the soul? And I can tell you that is what will bring you ultimate happiness, because you are acting at the soul platform. You are feeding the soul also. Initially, it may not be so pleasing, because as I said, mind is an enemy when it is uncontrolled. Currently, our minds are uncontrolled. As I said, I think I spoke in this class earlier, I don't know. When you start chanting Hare Krishna, 1 round mantra will take 8 minutes. Is it not? It takes only 8 minutes, but you chant, you see what will happen. So 8 minutes, the mind cries so much, it fights, it feels as if it is 8 hours. So it will tell you, oh, you know what, you have to do the study, you have to submit this assignment, you have to pay the mobile bill, you have to pay the current bill, you have to take care of your children, you have to kind of do the homework, you have to get a saree for your wife, you have to bring the sabji, bhaji, you have to get a cylinder filled, and you have this, that, 100 things, come on, get up, how long, you are wasting so much of your time. Mind will be continuous live commentary. And somehow you completed 1 round and then put the bead and said, chalo mind, kya bol rahe ho? Tell me what? Kya karna hai? What should I do? And nothing yaar, so jao. We will see about later. The same mind which was giving 100 excuses when you are kind of chanting, because mind doesn't want that. So mind in general, in a conditioned stage, it's our enemy. It does not allow you to focus on spiritual things actually, right? It doesn't show you any interest. But then what Krishna is telling, abhyasa. That means what? Practice. Because by intelligence, your intelligence is understanding this chanting of the holy names is the most beneficial for the soul, and it is the way to control your mind. So by intelligence you understand this is right, and your mind is crying, but because by your intelligence what you should do, you should control it actually. You still keep chanting. And that is the reason we have the regulation. Krishna also speaks 2 things. He speaks. 1 thing is practice, another thing is regulation. Regulation means you should take vows. Okay, let me chant 1 round, 2 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever. Or not only about chanting, but all other practices. Let me go every Sunday to temple, no matter what. Let me read at least half an hour Bhagavad Gita daily, no matter what. Like that, you make a regulation. Then you have to stick to it, and mind will keep crying. But because you have made a regulation, and by deliberance and then by practice, okay, once or twice you may fail, your mind may overpower you, but still by practice and by deliverance, what happens? Slowly your mind will become subdued, mind will become your friend. And after that, the same mind will help you cooperate actually. It will not allow you to do wrong things. Mind will, when you do something wrong things, mind will tell you, come on, don't do that. So that's all possible, and by doing that, what happens? That's for your eternal credit, right? So now last but one slide. So Krishna is telling here, he is telling the glorious power of yoga. You know what he is saying? He is telling, my dear Arjuna, you should understand, yogi here refers to any yogi, any of the 4 yogis. Yogi is greater than ascetic. Ascetic means somebody who is just doing austerities. It's better than ascetic, without any goal. It's greater than empiricist. Empiricist means who only thinks, oh, this world is like this world is like that. I think it is like this, I think it is like that. You see, there are so many Gyanis who read so many books about, oh, maybe God is like this, maybe God is like that, maybe this world is like this, like that. It's no good for nothing actually, just mental speculation. So Krishna is telling yogi is better than the empiricist, and yogi is greater than even the fruity worker. Fruity worker means karma kanda. I spoke, right? These fruity workers, they refer to scriptures for their own enjoyment actually. So the karma kanda. So here Krishna is telling yogi is better than all these paths. He is telling actually. So he is telling in all circumstances be a yogi. And then last shloka he is telling here that how even amongst the yogis, who is the topmost yogi, he is telling the bhakti yogi is the topmost yogi. You can see this karma yoga and jnana and ashtanga, right? Bhakti. Of course, ashtanga yoga is not practical in this time and age. Jnana, and from karma also can become bhakti. So this bhakti yogi is the topmost. Krishna is telling actually, how he is telling? Yoginam api sarvesham madhyatenantaraatmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. So he is telling, Krishna is telling, my dear Arjuna, yoginam api sarvesham, of all the yogis, the one madhyatenantaraatmana, one with great faith, who always thinks of me in himself, within himself, who always meditates on me, and shraddhavan bhajate man, with shraddha means with great faith and love, bhajate man, who offers, bhajate means loving service. So it actually is referring to bhakti yogi, because as I said, bhakti yogi, what is the process? Service with love, that is bhakti yogi, right? Karma yogi means detached action. Dhyana yogi means meditating on the Paramatma form. Jnana yogi means, which we will see later, much later in Bhagavad Gita. Jnana yogi means studying the elements of nature. So he is telling that Shraddhavan bhajate yom samyak tamam. He is telling that for all the yogis, who is the topmost? The Bhakti yogi is the topmost. Krishna is concluding the chapter number 6, telling that the yogi is topmost, yogi is superior to all other things. And amongst yogis, Bhakti yogi is the topmost. That is what Krishna is telling. And with this, chapter number 6 ends, and chapter number 7 onwards, Krishna speaks exclusively about Bhakti Yoga in the next 6 chapters. So most of the questions all of you are asking in the WhatsApp groups, I am not answering everything because they will be covered in the subsequent chapters. So next 6 chapters is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The essence of Bhagavad Gita is from chapter 7 to 12. And tomorrow onwards we will be seeing that, right? With this chapter ends, and we will see the summary sheet. Chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, where it speaks about the mind enemy or friend. If you control, then mind becomes friend, and mind helps you so much. If you cannot control, it becomes enemy. It will be havoc in your life. And then we discuss about Ashtanga Yoga, how it is 8 paths, and then 8 limbs are there. It's practicality. What is it? It's not practical for this time and age, right? And then we discuss success and failure of a yogi, right? When the yogi is life, in one sense there is no failure because nothing is lost, right? So even if somebody failed on the path, he will again start from the point where he left.